to the Modern Day Overthinker podcast. My name is Colin, and I am your host. Today's episode is with Joseph, or do you prefer Joe Reid?
Yeah, so Joe is fine.
Joe is fine?
It's way shorter.
It's way easier, yes.
Yeah.
You got a good name that's not one I'm going to butcher. I've had a couple names on the podcast before where I'm just like, oh, you just introduce yourself.
Yeah, but if you did butcher it, that would be impressive. So
I'd have to try to butcher
goals.
it. Yeah, goals. Well, I appreciate you being here, man. It was good timing because you're speaking tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get started, I just wanted to have you introduce yourself. And you are involved in the advocacy world pretty deep. So you do a lot of different things. So it's way easier for me to have you introduce yourself. So I appreciate you being here, and I'll let you have the floor for a second here.
Yeah, great studio, great show. I listened to the one that you sent me. It was really cool. I'm Joe Reid. Top 3 things about me is I love God, I love my wife, and I love my kids. So, I mean, that really nails it down for who I am as a person. And the extension of that is loving people through, I feel like our pain has a purpose. And at least I really hope it does.
Oh, yeah.
And so using some of the tragedy that I've experienced to make life a little bit easier, not only for myself, but for others. And so I got a book. It was a bestseller on Amazon. My workbook just came out. It was a #1 new release on Amazon. And that's for people that are incarcerated. And we'll dive into what the book is. I've got an international Facebook group called Broken People. We're in 43 countries.
Yeah, I checked it out. It's growing. That's for sure.
It's growing. Yeah, it's not. And honestly, our goal for Broken People has never been growth in terms of numbers. I think one of the things that I grew up in the church, and one of the problems with the church that I don't want to repeat in the mental health.
I'll fix this for you, just so you don't.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. So in the mental health world, like the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, long suffering, gentleness, meekness. None of that stuff has to do with quantitative growth. It's all about qualitative growth.
Oh yeah.
And
That's
so if I can just
important.
help,
if you have 1,000 people in there and only 5 people are talking,
or it helps flipping nobody.
Yeah.
So like if I can help one person, what an honor to do that one thing. So not setting my bar high. We got to 1,300, 1,200 people that that's good. And if the Lord provides more, I'm down with it. I'll do whatever. So
yeah, that's a cool little. You don't even need to get on message boards anymore. You just create a Facebook group, and the majority of people are on Facebook anyway. So
yeah, and that's how this thing started. Like I started writing after tragedy in my life, and I got in touch with this guy, and he's like, "Well, you can write a book and only impact the people that are reading the book, or you can." Well, he said he wanted me to start a ministry, but I'm like, we have too many fucking ministries in Grand Rapids as it is, that we need better people to lead them. So I'm like, and plus the demographic of people that I would reach with my story, I think would way surpass the people that were necessarily in a church. Because I think there's a lot of connection that is lost just because we put labels on people and it separates us. And yeah, my book obviously has reached, and the group has reached people that from all walks of life. And it's been a blessing to me to be able to interact with people that I wouldn't typically had the chance to interact with them within the boundaries and the walls of the church.
Yeah, that's how I feel doing this. I mean, I've met so many different people from doing the podcast and doing stuff on social media, and I was talking about that earlier. Just like the random people I know that I've never even met in real life is crazy, and it's awesome. But I could be like, a friend of mine. They're like, your friend, like, who are you talking about? Like, it's an online friend, and everybody's like, what? Like, yeah, I have a lot of those. And
the one from Connecticut you did the interview with, is that the lady that has her own support group? Elizabeth, was it? Or
oh, that was not Elizabeth. I'm bad with names.
The one
Sarah.
Okay,
Yep. Yeah, Sarah. That was the one I sent you. Was the episode with Sarah?
Yeah, that was a good one. I like that.
Yeah, Sarah's really good, and we talked a lot about OCD, which is great because that's what I like to talk about.
Are you obsessive about talking about OCD?
No. It's it gets people. It's a subject that not a lot of people really truly understand. And I have to make sure I I don't know. I talk about it as much as I can. Not necessarily, yeah, because I am obsessed with it. I'm more obsessed with making sure people truly understand it and don't think it's just like a cleaning disorder or
Yeah.
like I wish it was. I'm not. No, I don't wish it was, but I wish I was more of a clean, tidy person. But that's not my world at all.
Right.
It's more about the intrusive thoughts and things like that. So, and dealing with the doubt. It's a lot of just feeding off of doubt. So,
Yeah.
but when I was listening to, like I said, I got a chance to listen to a portion of the book yesterday, and so let's kind of start from the beginning here. So you had a hospitalization in the early 2000s
Yep.
that kind of opened your eyes to your mental illness, and from there it kind of so describe that time period, and then getting to just a few years ago, you're like, oh, I'm going to write a book. So what brought you to that point? I know you said it was a tragedy. I don't know if you want to talk about it or not. But I wanted to just get into that story, like impacting you, just when you did your first stint. I should say it's a terrible way to say it, but I know how it is there. But when you went into the hospital the first time, because you said you got an ultimatum from your wife, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My first mental health getaway, a
Yeah,
little vacation.
yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in Detroit, and in a very charismatic background, Christian, Pentecostal, and back in the 80s and 90s, mental health. I mean, for anybody in general, I think wasn't really addressed, but especially within the church, it was it was a spiritual issue and was something we prayed about.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I have no doubt that my parents and my pastor were doing the best they could, and I know
Of course.
the church right now is turning a huge corner in addressing these things. But yeah, I just thought if I just made better decisions, if I was just more faithful in my prayers, that I wouldn't have the struggles that I had then, and what seemed so normal to me to have suicidal thoughts every 10 minutes or whatever, or when something went wrong, like that's just my daily life. But when I sat down with my doctor, and he was like, "Oh, that's not actually how I think," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Really? Why not?"
Not everybody's like this. Yeah.
And so I moved to Grand Rapids from Detroit and as a police officer for Grand Rapids for a short time, and also did a trip to Kosovo, which is now again experiencing a lot of ethnic disturbance between Serbians and Albanians. And the time that I was there in 2001, it was KFOR was there, was a United Nations force that was working to kind of keep the separation of people, because when they got together, that's when problems started.
Mm.
And when I was there, I visited right after the big war with Milosevic, and there was just a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction, a lot of families broken, a lot of stories that were just devastating. And I we went there with a church group to try to make a difference, and I was just overwhelmed by what in the world could I do. So, getting out of the law enforcement, coming back from that experience and not really having a direction or goal for life. I was working at FedEx at the time after I left law enforcement. And I was just struggling. And my wife, I'd been journaling for a little bit, and she found some pictures of me.
Oh, okay.
What I was trying to do is convince myself to kill myself. I was trying to build up, because that's the only future I could see for myself. Like I had this image of going behind a potty store. That's where you go to the bathroom. You got to pay for it though. No, a party store, and just kind of off in myself. I know it's not a nice way to put it, but that's my life. That's my story.
Yeah.
And yeah, she saw a picture of I had a shotgun in my mouth, and something I'd drawn, and she got in touch with my therapist, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna give you some time away to deal with yourself." But when they did that, we're talking 2002. I was going through ministry school, so I took all my books with me. I took all my studies. I took, I was just going to use this as like a little chance to get away and do my homework. Yeah, just to, and man, that really got in the way of self-care. And the nurses did not like that. My wife didn't like that. It took all my books away.
Yeah, that's not what you're here for.
No, I know. And I was trying to be helpful. Like, they had people struggling. Like, I would try to help people around, and like that's just my personality. And actually, that's what got me in a lot of trouble was
People pleasing.
people pleasing, but also just you know, right around that time I was working in children's ministry, and anytime I would run across somebody that had a need or a want, I would jump in, and I think, well, I'm aware of this need. Who's better to do something than the person that's aware of the need? So no matter where the need came from or whatever, somebody needed help with something, I would just jump in and do it. And I was burning myself out. And really the church, having me work so many hours as a volunteer, really didn't give me any direction in terms of how to create boundaries. And I was, just still a kid basically at 23, 24.
Yeah.
And, so that overextending myself was a major player in being hospitalized too. And that empathy, I'm like an empathy bomb, I care so much about people. And, I think I know what everybody's thinking, even though probably half the time I'm wrong, but it matters to me. That's the thing. Even if I'm wrong, it still matters to me what you're feeling and thinking. And I care very deeply. So got into the hospital, spent some time there. It's one of 4 trips. So
good times. When was the second one?
The second one, I'm drawing a blank right now.
So did you come back? We're good for a while.
Yeah, I made a comeback.
Yeah.
So I think the second one, it was Holland Hospital, and that was in 2013. And I can't remember what led up to that, but I knew it was coming. It was like, I just want to do this every 10 years, That's what I felt like. So this year, when it's 2023, I'm like, am I going to, just keep the routine going? And I was like, I feel okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think, the last time, 2013, I was involved with children's ministry still, just doing a lot of stuff, overextending myself again.
Yeah.
And just letting me fall into those mental traps of believing all the stuff up in your head. And that time I was able to kind of deal with it myself. So I created a team of people around me and my family. I prepared them so that when I was going to go in, we had a lot of resources available. And that ended up being really
So
helpful.
that wasn't an ultimatum situation.
That was a me, self-driven.
Yeah.
I know I need this. And I actually, so that was 4 times. So that was the second time. And then I got out after 2 weeks, and then I went back in after a week. And then I did a stent of, there's the word, stent of outpatient.
Okay.
So good times.
It reminds me a lot of, with going into the psych ward, but going into because it's basically rehab for your brain. I know a lot of people that have gone to rehab for addiction, and it doesn't always take the first time. It's very, or the first time they're forced to go. Okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
I guess you give me no choice, and it takes really somebody really wanting to go.
Yeah,
for it to actually stick.
And I just had somebody go to a recovery thing like that, and one of the powerful things they said to me was relapse is part of recovery, and the more we can accept
for some
that,
people, it doesn't have to be, but for a lot of people, for a lot of people, that's part of their story.
It is, and you think about in terms of incarceration, recidivism rates are so high. That's just another form of rehabs.
It's the cheaper version.
Yeah, it's the cheaper version. It's the There's a lot more to describe that other than just cheaper.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's a messed up version. Sure.
Yeah, because I have a friend that's hopefully getting out in the next few months. He said 6 months at the most when I talked to him a couple weeks ago, but he's in there because of he's nonviolent, just he's an addict and got caught up in some stuff, and the thing is, he's been there before. It's when you're talking to him, he's he sounds great. He's doing well. He's so used to it.
Yeah.
Because he's done it. He's older than I am, and he's been there. I think he's done before he did this time. It was 12 years total. And he's just yep.
Yeah, I remember my first time in the hospital was 2 weeks. It was pretty intense, and my big fear after about a week and a half was, wow, I can't imagine functioning outside of this facility. the real world, and that
Yeah.
institutionalization, like, oh, this is just part of life, this is, and then that's
You have a
not
set
healthy.
schedule,
Yeah, and you get out, and I've had a couple buddies, spend a decade and more in prison, and they develop great habits in prison because they've got those strict boundaries, and I don't think people recognize the benefit of boundaries like that
Mm-hmm.
that we put upon ourselves. And they get out and they have this great whatever study life, and then they have all these options. It's like walking into a cereal aisle and your wife says, pick out a cereal, and you got 50 million choices.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to spend a half an hour there.
That's the worst style for me.
Oh, that's the worst, man. Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the book and getting to that point where you're like, okay. And you said you talked to like a friend of yours that kind of encouraged it, or was it someone in the church, or?
Yeah, he was my wife. My wife runs a Starbucks out in West Michigan.
Okay.
And he was a customer, and he did some work with Our Daily Bread is a publishing company, Christian publishing company out there, and
Okay.
And he just kind of
name.
Yeah, he kind of took me under his wing and gave me some guidance and encouragement that I needed, and because I was just pissed, I was just mad, after the tragedy that happened. And I really didn't know where to focus it, but I was just writing. And I can go into that story a little bit if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so the first instance when I went in the hospital, there was a lot of really weird, scary stuff that happened in the hospital. And I'm only just now recently claiming it as, I probably have some PTSD from that.
Trauma, yeah.
And so I never wanted to go back to a mental hospital because I didn't feel safe. And, that kind of environment, you should feel safe, but, a lot of things have changed over the decades. And back then they were, doing the best they could in that situation. And in the process of me kind of on this up and down roller coaster of my life and emotions, I ran across this buddy of mine, he's pastor, Nathan Beals. And when I first met him, he had just gotten out of the hospital. And he's like a, 350, 400-pound black man, 6'8". And but basically we're twins. Like everything that he liked, I liked. Everything that I liked, he liked. For it was a Halloween or something one time, like I ended up with a Sharpie marker, a permanent marker, painting or drawing his beard on my face, and then drawing the glasses that he wore on my eye. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, he so impressed me that I wanted to be like him and like look like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, so I ended up going to the hospital again in 2013, like I said, and I knew I needed to go, but I didn't feel safe. So he had told me the hospital he had been to. So him, my pastor, my wife, we had two pastors at the time, took me up to the hospital, and just kind of shepherded me in a little bit in an easy and safe way, and I felt really, really wonderful there. And so there was a cycle of Nathan and I kind of going in and out of hospitals. Okay. So he would go, I would go in the hospital, he would bring me sweet tea and Oreos. He would go in the hospital, same thing, sweet tea and Oreos. It got to the point where one hospital he went into, they stopped allowing food.
Oh. So
you can bring candy. Like, how am I going to get him as Reese's peanut butter cups?
Yeah.
So I found this old book, this really old book, it's thick, and I just carved it out, lined it with glue, stuffed it with candy, took it in. And the funny thing is I met the author of that book and told him the story, and he thought it was awesome. He's like, that's the best use of my book I've ever heard. And I snuck it in there. They didn't check the book in security, and he saw the book, and he just kind of threw it down on the ground like, oh, this is trash, and candy everywhere. And if you got scattered candy in a mental ward, it's like, it's dangerous. Yeah. It's a free for all.
Yeah.
But it was awesome. And I want to say it was 2017, he had attempted suicide twice, in pretty thought out and intentional ways.
Planned.
Very well planned out and researched and all of that. And then his third attempt on January 24th, 2018, he passed away. and he was our worship pastor. He was my best friend. He was, you find that person you can talk to, that you can connect with, that doesn't just hear your words, but understands the thoughts behind it.
Yeah.
And because they felt it. Like, for example, my wife, her response to my depression was fear, and her fear response to my depression was anger. So, we pretty much knew that any kind of struggle that I had where I needed to verbalize it needed to go to Nathan, because he got it and it was safe. But when I lost Nathan, I lost that
outlet.
Yeah. So, and I think in that moment of losing that outlet is when I had to find another outlet. So, writing, and really now, even talking with you, it's like, you're my Nathan. You're somebody that gets it.
Yeah.
And talking to audiences and saying, this, being able to share so openly and knowing that I'm safe and that I have a support system to be there when I'm not safe, it's gold, man. It's really gold. And I think, and there's a lot that developed around that relationship with Nathan, around that season.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the way I did friendship really shifted between the 2002 experience and me trying to be there for everybody, to the 2018 experience where I've kind of lost everything in that one person that I could connect with, as well as just my ability to communicate with my wife in a way that wasn't scary to her, but also communicated the totality of my struggle. And that's really hard to do, especially with the tools that I kind of mainstream ways of communicating with loved ones that different mental health agencies and well-meaning people have put out there. It's really hard to communicate the struggle with people that don't really understand it.
Is that where the scale comes in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
The mental health scale.
So, yeah, in the book you talk about different tools, and that's the first tool, because that's as far as I got.
It's all downhill from there.
It's all downhill from there. Yeah, but the scale, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, because I get that, because the only scales I've seen, it's the ones I get from therapy. Are like 1 to 10, and the different smiley faces.
The smiley faces are great, man. It really puts the nail on the head.
Yeah, those ones.
Love the emojis.
Yeah, the emoji ones. Yep, I've seen different ones. So that's how you've been able to communicate with friends and family and anyone involved in your life, or professionals, on how you're feeling in a way that makes sense to not only to you but to them, and it doesn't overwhelm them. Is that the goal too, or is it just so it's easily transcribed?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It doesn't overwhelm them, and it doesn't overwhelm me.
Yeah.
I remember walking out of church talking with my friend Bill, and he's like, "Joe, how are you doing today?" And
the how are you question.
That's one of my chapters. Is I was like, I was literally doing all the mental gymnastics of, how do I answer this for him? Like, what do I, like, because I have this going on. And
how much do I dump?
Yeah, how much, like, I have this thought that happened to me during church. And finally, he just looked at me and said, "Joe, what's your mental health number?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's a 1." And he's like, "Okay, you're okay. You're okay. I get it." Like, yeah. So,
because on your scale, 1 is good.
Oh yeah, that's good. And there's another story about my buddy in Ireland that got really, really sick, and he was able to use the scale to communicate his wife, because he was doing
pain level, or like
he was in psychosis, and the only thing he could say to his wife that made any sense was, "Tell Joe I'm at a -7," which is past his crisis number, and that crisis number that's the point where you need to be hospitalized.
So 0 is the middle ground.
Yeah, middle's the 0 ground. It goes from -10 to 10, and it's for me it's got to be a no-brainer, because I don't have a whole lot of time to think when I'm really in that deep dark place.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything on the left side or that negative side, it's when I'm not doing well. And one of the things that really frustrates me about a lot of mental health scales is there's not a whole lot of room for positive feelings.
Yeah.
Usually you get like, oh, if on a positive 10 scale where 10 is good and 1 is bad, usually good feelings start around the 7. Like, well, how do you address mania?
Yeah.
And that's something my scale does, because mania is a real problem, especially when you have that like over-energized manic experiences, and like how do you handle that huge drop-off that happens. And I needed to address that, because not that I deal with extended versions of mania, but I do
So
have
not like
manic.
bipolar.
No,
or,
I'm not bipolar,
okay.
but I do have manic episodes, short-lived, that really cause big problems.
Yeah.
And helping me identify those, and then to be able to have a process in place of kind of cushioning the fall that I know that sometimes comes with that. And then there's just times when I feel manic that I'm like, where I feel really, really good. I'm afraid I'm manic, and then I crash just because I'm scared I'm manic. But really, I'm just having a really good day.
Yeah.
So why can't I just like celebrate that? And I think, that fear is such a tricky bastard.
Yeah. Like, why am I feeling so good?
Yeah.
What's
Like,
going on?
and having anxiety about being anxious. Or recently for my presentation tomorrow, I've had a lot of anxiety about not feeling anxious. I'm like, I should be more anxious. I'm not taking this seriously enough.
Yeah, I know how that goes. Yeah, I've only done one. I spoke one time, and it was for a nonprofit here. It's called the Gray Matters Collective.
Oh yeah, for schools.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I've heard good things.
yeah, I've gotten to know Haley, who's the director, a little bit, and she's like, "I want you to do comedy and speak," and I was like, together or separate, or what am I gonna do? So she thought that so I was like, I'm just gonna do it all together. I'm just gonna mix it all into one. And I was like, what's my audience? She goes, it could be anyone from the age of 10 all the way to like 60. I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, it's easy peasy.
Easy.
Yeah.
Luckily, the audience wasn't super young, so I was like, okay, I don't have to worry about filtering myself, because when I get into the comedy mode, I swear more, and just things just start coming out. And luckily, I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't swear too much. I was also in a church, so I was like, ugh. And I grew up Catholic, so
I wore my Catholic sweater for you today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm very the Catholic guilt just never goes away. But so she had me speak, and she's like, I thought you were gonna do like speaking about your story with your mental health journey, and then do stand up, or like the other way around. I'm like, nah, I just did it all together, because it's all relative to me. Like,
Yeah.
And the show I went to last night actually was called Laughter is Therapy, which is like perfect for me, because that's how I feel about it, and it's just been another great outlet for me.
It seems like it would be hard, and this was how it was for me in law enforcement, to take off one hat and put the other hat on. Like, it's all you.
Yeah, I was like, I don't like the separating the two.
Yeah.
And I also mixed in the the addiction recovery stuff too. It's just all goes together.
Yeah.
Some people get mad at me when I share, and if I go to a recovery meeting and I start sharing mental health stuff, they're like, "Oh, that's an outside issue," and that's like a phrase that you'll hear, and I'll just be like, "Well, it's part of my issue, so it goes hand in hand." Like,
I don't know. If it is a separate issue, it's a very gray. There's a very gray line.
yeah, it's very gray, because because I was trying to alter my brain chemistry and fix myself. I wanted to be my own doctor. I didn't want to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I wanted to be able. I never got it right, but I spent a lot of time and a lot of money researching that, for sure.
I try to be my own therapist.
Yeah. That I haven't tried to do, but
let's talk about that.
Psychiatrist, I have tried to be my own psychiatrist, which I think is maybe even worse, because when you bring chemicals involved, and oh my god. So when it comes to the book, it's been 2 years since it's been out. So
yeah.
When did you start to notice more of an uptick of like, oh, people are actually reading this? Like, because you don't know when you put out a book.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, well, I hope people read this. And then all of a sudden, because obviously if you look it up, you have a ton of reviews. People are reading it. People are giving feedback. And did that start right away? Or was it like all of a sudden like, oh, holy shit, like this is happening?
Yeah. So initially, I like to say that my goal was to sell 10 books. And since my mom bought 9 of them, like I just
That's
figured,
awesome.
man, I'm just that close to actually making it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I actually invested a lot, you know, Donald Trump did anything good, it was to give me some money during that season of life.
Yeah.
And I got some money, so I was able to go to school and get some publishing help in terms of how to figure out how to do it.
Okay.
And so I got a lot of education in terms of like marketing. And
Okay.
so I built up a team of support before my book launched, and all of those people kind of rallied around me, bought the book, promoted the book. We're talking about 300 people from around the nation, just talking about my book.
Okay.
And I never really cared about the numbers. I never cared about. I didn't care. I didn't look at the numbers. I didn't know if I was selling any. I just knew that I kept on adding people to the launch team. People were talking about it. I'm like, okay, well, I know this is what I need to be doing because this is what the textbook said I needed to be doing for like marketing and figuring out what the next steps were. And I was just kind of like a machine. It's like a lot of times I'll either, you talk about using your emotional mind or your logical mind, but then you mix them and you get that wise mind that you hear. If you're anybody familiar with dialectical behavior therapy, like wise mind is kind of like a huge thing. And combining those, but typically I keep them separate, my logical mind, and I'm just flowing logically to the processes of getting a book out there, and having a support team just really helped it take off. And then I think in terms of speaking, one of the things that really launched it in a crazy way was when I was asked by a National Alliance of Mental Illness to speak at a police academy, because I'm in recovery, essentially is what they call it. I'm on the positive side of the struggle with depression, and they wanted me to come and share my story. And I'm like, well, how do I go in to this police academy? Nobody really knew my story about law enforcement, and not share my story of working in law enforcement. So when I went in there, and number one, my community of broken people, that's why I call my organization Broken People. And the reason I call it Broken People, because when I'm at my lowest, that's how I feel, broken. So I thought, let's see if anybody else feels broken like me.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I go in there, and the community of broken people sponsored books for every recruit that was in that police academy. So we were able to give everybody a book, awesome. And all the teachers and officers that were there. And then when I popped the picture up on the screen about the day that I was sworn in, GRPD, the shift in the room, with more impressively or more significantly, was with the officers, the current officers. And there was a lot more of attention at that point of, okay, we didn't see this coming. This is a guy that kind of understands the job. And from there, I kept on being invited back to speak at academies, and then working with law enforcement in West Michigan, Wisconsin, Northern Michigan, and that created a lot more opportunity to speak and work with NAMI. And then I got involved with a church and did a webinar for them, which really sucked because they had a webinar which had a pastor, a professor, and me. And it was about mental illness without a single mental health professional on there. And like, I am not a professional. I'm just, I'm an expert to the degree
guy
of
with the story.
I'm an expert with my story.
Yeah.
And I was really pissed off. And it came across that way. And somebody in Wisconsin heard that and bought the book, and were really impressed. And brought me out there to do several seminars for law enforcement and for the communities in central Wisconsin. And then from there, it's just, I don't care, man. I've already come way further. I sold my 10 books. I'm good.
Not yet.
And
set the bar very low, and you're just like,
expectations, man, that screw you up sometimes.
I know all about that. Yeah,
but
small goals are great.
As soon as I found out there's 2 different categories in Amazon in terms of like becoming a bestseller. You have a number 1 new release, which doesn't necessarily make you a bestseller in a category, but you're a bestseller in that category for the books that just came out.
Yeah.
Which I think I hit like 4 categories of being a number 1 new release for my book. And then when it hit a number 1 national, like it was number 1 on the charts in 3 categories on Amazon nationally, like I remember getting out of the shower, finding that out, and just getting on my knees, and just thanking God, because like I didn't want it, I didn't ask for it, but I mean that's just, it blessed me. You know, it made me feel like, man, there's purpose in this pain, and
Yeah, purpose is huge, especially for people with depression.
And the thing, man, is like, you know, the thing I'm learning too, and it's just my story, and it could be full of shit at the same time, but like my struggle, my experience with being in law enforcement, and then 20 years later working with law enforcement, like God doesn't waste anything in my life. He hasn't wasted a thing, and it's taken time for those pain points for them to become a purpose. But man, just rocked my world when how I see things coming together, even in my marriage, man. Just like how things have been tough. We've been married 25 years, and how things are transitioning there, just because I'm willing and able to listen and love, and make some sacrifices. So.
Yeah, and communication's huge too.
What's that?
Communication.
I haven't figured that one out yet.
We're still working on that one.
Yeah, I just got the sex down. I'm just kidding. Can I say that?
Can I say that?
Yeah.
No, you can say whatever you want.
All right. Well, I like turtles, and we'll say that.
We can talk about turtles.
We can. This is the mental illness podcast, right?
So, I talked about it earlier, like how I can go like so many different ways with that.
Absolutely.
When, because you talked about law enforcement earlier, so how long were you in law enforcement?
I was a sworn-in officer for 36 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. Time. It blows your mind. Like, wow, how did you last that long? Yeah, I went to Academy, Flint, Michigan, where the Flint water crisis was. I graduated third in my class there, studied at college in Dearborn, Michigan, and then moved to Grand Rapids with my wife and kid. Went 3 weeks of training there, and then got sworn in. Was never even really, it was kind of like this weird thing where I was sworn in as an officer, but my paperwork never made it to the state headquarters. So I was a sworn in officer, but not a certified officer. It was kind of weird. So they let me carry a gun, but it wasn't like official. I was only halfway official. It was just weird.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
So, but things have changed in law enforcement, and they have a lot of really great certification processes or whatever. But yeah, it was hard. And that 36 hours, man, it's amazing how that embarrassment that I feel from that, what I have always thought to be a failure. I mean, if anybody's failed, that's a pretty good example of failure, if there is an example of failure. But the reception I received by sharing that story has been pretty amazing, and the comfort and the welcoming of the community of law enforcement officers and fire has been tremendous, because there's a lot that I had to say, especially to that community that needs to be heard, especially in the climate of today's society.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because with everyone, not everyone, but there's just a good portion of people are like, you know, like there's the defund the police, there's all that stuff going on, and it's just like, and it seems like there's a gap.
Yeah, right.
Big gap.
It's almost like there's a big gap between, like, well, there's stigma
and
related
trust.
Yeah, there's a stigma related to mental illness, and there's a stigma related to law enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
There's a stigma related to Christianity, and there's all these gaps exist. There's an aisle gap between Democrat and Republican, and it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
And we got to get past that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's like, why can't we just all work together? Why does it have to be like...
We can't, because you're wrong. Because you're wrong.
Yeah.
And I have all the answers.
Yeah.
I just don't have a podcast like this guy.
Yeah. It's, I got to watch it with that. It's like, yeah, I see this, I see that. I'm like, It's just like, why do I have to go all in on one thing? It's just so weird to me. That's not how the world works.
It's not how the world works. It's not how mental illness works. It's never black or white. And to look at it like that is just narrow-minded and is part of the problem. And why there's stigma out there.
And most people you talk to are pretty moderate, like, anyway. Like,
yeah. And I think most people you talk to about mental illness have a pretty good understanding of this. Oh, we're not going to go shoot up a movie theater. Or whatever. They understand that, but then there's this fear of particular types of mental illness that make people think, oh, I don't want to be around that person. I don't feel safe around them or whatever. And yeah, I think we just need to listen. I have this phrase that I use: we listen with our mouths, and that's this whole idea of, I hear what you're saying, and I can substantially speak back to you what you said because I've listened to you. And if I don't, and if it doesn't come back to you the way that you said it, then I want to hear it again so I understand it. But you're just too busy talking. Want to talk all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, nonstop. Just don't want to shut up.
I don't want to shut up.
Just keep going.
I just keep going.
Yeah, talking.
You can have a solo podcast like Bill Burr. You know the comedian Bill Burr?
I don't know many people at all.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
I don't know who you're talking
Okay, Bill Burr is
I know Big Bird.
older dude from Boston. He's been doing comedy for a long time. But he does podcasts, like solo podcasts by himself all the time. He just rants.
Oh, wow.
And just goes off. He's hilarious. Basically just it's like almost like a new comedy special every time he records a podcast. But yeah.
That reminds me of my therapy session on Monday last week, where I'm just talking to my therapist, and all of a sudden I'm just like, I'm going to talk to myself. And I had this great dialogue with myself back and forth, and my therapist was like, you could tell she was getting uncomfortable. She had to say something like, hold on. I'm on a good flow right here.
Yeah.
And but I don't have the chops or the extrovertness to do this, man. So it's pretty incredible that you're doing it and with the struggle. And quite frankly, the audience that's listening right now should really go on there, give you 5 stars and share this episode because what you're doing matters and your story matters. And I appreciate that you're putting out the content that you are just by sharing your story, because your story is unique to you, but it's going to touch the hearts and stories of other people that my story cannot.
Yeah, it's very important. I try to get people to open up as much as possible, because I know a lot of people struggling, and some people are just like, whether it's the stigma or whether it's just fear. They don't want to.
Yeah, a lot of people just aren't to that place where
they aren't there yet.
It's safe,
Yeah.
and for me, I have this safety net of people that I can fall back on when I've gone too far in sharing my vulnerability and I'm struggling. A lot of people don't have that base,
Oh yeah.
And they don't have the medication, they don't have the therapist, they don't have the diet, they don't have the exercise. Like, there's so many things that go into making this right. And
yeah, I never thought I would be an exercise guy, and I have been an exercise guy for almost 2 years now.
rock on.
And before that, I was like, nope, the gym, I hate that place. I'm never going. But the physical benefits are cool, but I go for the mental benefits.
That's the whole reason why I go, man. It's the number one thing I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What gym can you shout out to your gym? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's Planet Fitness. So.
I do 20. I do the black card.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm rolling.
Yeah.
I get that
living the high
massage chair.
Yeah, the massage chair. I wish they had a sauna, though.
Oh, yeah, they don't have. They have the
That's the only.
Have you used the tanning?
No.
Oh, yeah, neither.
Nah.
They got the hydro massage. Yeah, maybe we get sponsored by Planet Fitness on it.
Yeah. I have yet to get any I've had a few people reach out about doing affiliate marketing type stuff, and I'm just I don't want to do some promo code stuff.
Crap.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, man. Good. I think the most people I talk to that do the workout do it for their mental health that are in my community. Oh yeah. You got the gym rats or sharks or whatever that they're there for building or whatever. But yeah, man.
I get into it a little bit. You try to compete with myself and try to up the weight, up the max and stuff like that. But yeah, it's it's cool to see that, see the growth in that. But,
yeah, it is. That's amazing. Yeah, I went from I'm 6'4", 220 right now. I was 170, 6'4" not too long ago. Probably about 10 years. I've been going for 6 years, and I'm pretty decent. I'm pretty in shape. So yeah, and the whole reason I did that, I knew I needed to go for my mental health,
Mm-hmm.
but I also just wanted to look really hot for my wife. So
Helpful. Yeah. I'm also single in my 30s, so I'm just like,
Yeah.
I should probably work on myself a little bit physically as well. That
And
probably
here's his phone number for all the single ladies listening right now. All the single ladies.
Yeah.
All the single ladies.
We're gonna get a little karaoke going next after this, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, that shows you a lot though about my listeners. Most like I was telling you earlier about a much larger percentage are female, and I think it's because women pay more attention to their mental health than men do.
Yeah.
It's just like, and that goes back to stigmas, and it just goes back to
Yeah.
like, not just stigmas, just the way some of us were raised.
Yeah.
Like, man up, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah.
it's still there.
Yeah. And there's a lot of minority communities too right now that are just realizing that, that
Oh yeah.
the need for like the percentage of African American therapists out there is so small, but they're realizing that that's so important for people to be able to connect with somebody from their own ethnicity. And then
Shout out Aaron Snyder. He's a therapist out in, I think he's actually in Michigan too.
What?
I'll have to give you his info when I get out. He's been on the podcast before a long time ago. I need to have him back on. And he's an author too. He wrote a book called Black Mental Health Matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and they have this thing, PTSD, race-based traumatic syndrome, and like how it's passed down genetically. That's a real thing. It's hard, as a middle-aged white guy to really understand, but it's serious. And I'm glad there's a lot of growing conversation around that. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Some things that are happening, but more and more needs to happen.
And I listen to a lot of hip hop, as you can see by some of the stuff on my wall. But that's why I have J. Cole on the wall, because he is very open about just stuff going on in his life. He's very much a lyrical rapper, not like.
Yeah.
And Mac Miller was the same way. And there's starting to be less of a stigma in that community as well.
Yeah.
To be open about, what's going on with your life, like, whether it's addiction or mental health or combination of the both. They usually go hand in hand, as we talked about earlier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're talking about like criminal behavior, like stuff like that. I mean, there's, I gotta give a shout out to my man NF. He's my hip hop guy. Like
NF's
his
awesome.
Story, like hashtag NF. Go get him out here. Thanks for listening, NF.
Yeah,
we know you're out there.
Yeah, he would be a great guest. Yeah.
Yeah, he, his way of connecting with me and my boys and my daughter. His stories were real, and
he's a great example of that.
Yeah, and he's a Christian guy, and a lot of Christian families won't let their kids listen to him because it's too dark. I just think it's real. It's already going on.
Yeah.
So give him a point of connection. In his new album came out, Hope, and I really think there's a lot of that in that album in terms of like flipping the coin, flipping the script.
He's pretty young too. How old is he?
I think he just turned 30. I think he talks about being 30 in his new album.
He's turning the leaf.
So happy birthday, NF.
Yeah.
Love you.
I remember when
Hi, Mom, by the way.
Hi, Mom. Yeah, when I turned 30, I was like, what is going on? But my 20s were brutal. So
my 30s were brutal.
Really?
Yeah. I tell you, are you 40 yet?
No.
Okay. 40s, man.
33.
When I turned 40, man, it's like my life just flipped the script. It was awesome. Like my 40s been fantastic.
That's how it's been with my 30s, my 20s.
That's awesome, man. That's good, man. 30 sucked for me.
I guess everybody has their
decade. Oh, I don't want to turn 50 now.
And I don't want to turn 50 now. Nah, it seems to be on the up and up from here. And but I have to keep myself in check and do what I need to do. Like I notice myself, like if I'm slacking on my therapy, if I'm slacking on my recovery, then something's not going. Things aren't going well.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long for it to start to go downhill.
Well, a lot of times there's not a reason for it either. Like
no.
there may be for me, it's like I'll have a down day and it's so frustrating because I don't know what caused it.
Everything around you is just awesome.
Yeah, and I was just like, well, I mean, isn't that what mental illness is? It doesn't have to make sense. It's not situationally.
It's not logical.
It's just like, hey, this is an illness that shows its ugly head for no reason at all. And and I think accepting that acceptance sucks, but it's helpful, especially when people around you can understand what that acceptance is, what that illness looks like, and understand actually to what degree you're feeling something. Because if you can't communicate with them where you're at, they may think, oh, I don't know if they need to be in the hospital or if they just need some alone time in bed for a day. And did you hear the story about the Mars rover I put in the book?
I didn't hear that part. No.
Oh yeah. So the whole idea of communicating like where we're at, like with the mental health scale, and you can find it at www.broken-people.org/myscale, MYSCALE. And there's a video there that explains it really simple, 4 minutes. So there's this in 2016, I think it was 2016.
I'll put a link for people to make it even easier.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, technology.
Yeah.
They sent us this Mars rover, this thing to orbit Mars for a while, and Lockheed Martin built the ship and designed the mechanics and the electrical stuff. And when they built it to function on the metric system.
Oh, I do remember this now. Okay. Yeah, I did get that
NASA,
part, yeah.
and I might be getting it backwards, but NASA, I believe, was using the imperial system in terms of communicating with the orbiter. And when they sent the information out there to kind of hit the orbit of Mars, in the imperial system in inches or whatever per pounds per whatever, and the orbiter is reading it as, okay, this is meters, kilograms, whatever. Like that inability to speak to each other caused, was it $12 million or something like that to go down the drain because it crashed. They lost it. It was wasted money because they couldn't talk to each other. And I think a lot of lives are lost unnecessarily
because a different language
because we don't know how to talk to each other.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I mean, and let's just talk about, like, I use the scale for everything. Like, I use it for my wife's cooking. I mean, our ability to talk to each other in politics, our ability to talk to each other about religion, about that you're better looking than me, which is still a little bit intimidating right now. But I'm doing okay.
No Matt Rife though. We'll share Matt Rife later.
I'll take my medication, and I'll be okay. I have a lot of support at home for my ugliness.
Hey, when you're married, you can you kind of have you're locked in though.
Yeah, you know what, man? Like, I had somebody come at me the other day, and they were like, "You don't know my loneliness because you're married." And like, man, when you're married,
you can still be lonely.
The loneliness is different.
Yeah,
but it sucks because you don't feel like you should be lonely. And
I'm married. I'm not supposed to be lonely.
Yeah. You think that's going to solve it, and really it just makes it different. And you can't compare your struggle with my struggle, and it doesn't do anybody any favors.
Yeah, I don't. People are like, people ask me if I, do you wish you were married or whatever. I'm just like, nah, it's clearly just not my time. That's not.
Yeah.
I just look at it that way. I'm like, I haven't met the right person. I've been in relationships. I've learned a lot from those relationships, and but if I was in a relationship right now, it would have to be very much, she would have to be doing her own thing. I had to be doing my own thing. I've run into a lot of codependent issues in the past, and it's just like, I do a lot of different things, and I enjoy my freedom of being able to do, set my own schedule and do whatever I need to do. It does come with the side of loneliness, but it's like,
you have a way of doing things that is going to be different from other people. One of the sections of my book is called utilization. Mm-hmm. At the end of a chapter, I have this utilization section. It's called YOU. How do you take the concepts I introduce in this book and make them your own? And even in a relationship or marriage, my wife and I have a completely different way of making our bed. The bed gets made no matter what, but it's still different. And like with this,
all the extra pillows,
I've got my little stuffed animal over here. He's my emotional support reindeer.
Nice.
His name is Sloppy. Shout out to Sloppy. The job's getting done, and with my book, I don't expect people to have the same outcomes as me, or even to use the tools that I introduce the same as I do, but to utilize them. Again, YOU, make them your own, bring them into your world, and make them work for you with your community. And that's where you're going to find the most success, because you look like me, have my experience, my life, my friends, and really the best thing you can do for yourself is really to make it work for you and make it fit into that unique world that's your own. I think it leads to so much frustration when I read a lot of books where it's like I'm expected to follow this path, and
This is the only way.
this is the only way.
Yeah.
And I'm reading a book right now. Actually, it's really great about this. It's Atomic Habits, and just a fantastic book about just developing, and not like in a forceful way of, oh, you got to do it this way, but just to give some guidance, some very general guidance, so you can look and create some good, healthy habits. And it's not a book for mental illness, but man, it really impacts me.
It's like a self-help.
Yeah. James Clear it's an amazing book. So I listened to the audiobook, and then I just bought it, and I bought it for my board members because it's just that good.
That's awesome. Yeah, audiobooks seem to work better for me in general, just because of the way I am. Like with my ADD, I'm just all over the place when I try to read, and also with my OCD, when I try to read a book, I will read the whole thing, and I'll be like, I didn't get the whole thing, so I have to read the whole thing again.
Yeah.
And then I start a cycle, and I'm just like, oh, this sucks. I'm not even enjoying reading this book. I'm just going to put it down and never look at it again. So I've had multiple books where I've started, like, and I get like halfway through, and it's like completely, it's something I'm trying to work on with my therapist, actually, is getting past that. So I don't think, oh, you can just read the book again. You don't have to like read every page again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or like you could just read a chapter and not and like one that appeals to you. Like I have a hard time with that. Like if I read a chapter, I got to read the whole thing, or I feel unfaithful. Or something. I don't know.
You're committed.
Yeah.
You can't just read one page. My one friend was like, if you want to get back, because I'm trying to get back into. Reading helps. I'm trying to stay away from my phone more. That's a big thing. How we talked about that. Yeah. Being attached to your phone, and
no, I'm just thinking you want to check the screen.
Oh, I thought you were pointing at her.
No, on her phone. Yeah, my daughter's sitting over there on the other side of the screen with her phone, being a great example. Like she's giving us cues.
It's tough though. It's just there's. Like it's almost like an impulse. Like if I'm bored, I will grab my phone without even realizing it.
Hey, do you think we could bring my daughter on here just to talk for a minute?
Yeah,
we
can do that.
Yeah,
you want to talk about your phone addiction?
My phone addiction. I'm kind of bored.
Yeah, that's
good.
Yeah,
we'll mix it up.
I didn't write the book.
You didn't write the book.
I just wrote the foreword.
You wrote the foreword.
He likes to call it the first chapter, but yeah.
Father daughter.
So it's a very much a family business, and it's Hannah, right?
It's Hannah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's an easy one too. I like easy names.
You can say it forward or backwards. I respond to both. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You should start doing stand up. Watch out though; it's addicting. Like your phone. So we talked about earlier. You said you won't get on TikTok because you feel like you'll get absorbed.
No, I don't do TikTok.
Because you'll get absorbed by it.
Oh yeah, I'm one of those people where you put a screen in front of me and I totally lose track of time, and I'll just be, especially with videos. Like if they're videos, I know myself and I know that it'll be 30 minutes before you know it.
Okay, so I see you brought up a YouTube channel, so you're a YouTube person, probably.
I wouldn't call myself a YouTube person. I find I have 2 channels that I just kind of commit to, and those I watch for hours. But
you stick to those, okay?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So what do you find yourself when you're on your phone, when you're attached to your phone? What do you find yourself getting absorbed into the most?
I think it's just mind numbing. I just appreciate the mind numbing aspect of it. So I think it doesn't matter. So when I'm going on my phone, it's escape. Yeah, it doesn't matter what I'm looking at.
Escapism. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just an escape. It's just something to clear my mind and not be caught up in my mind.
My thing is, I'm on my phone all day, but before I go to bed, and I know the blue light's really bad. I've heard enough about it, and can mess up your sleep. And do you try to put your phone down, or do you fall asleep phone in hand? Or does it depend?
So I fall asleep with my phone next to me, but I've been trying to read when I'm falling to sleep, because, reading will put me right to sleep. That's a great way to make me pass out.
Yeah.
That's what she reads.
This book all night long.
She reads this book,
fall
and then
she falls asleep. I've been trying to memorize it from the front to the back, so about halfway there.
About halfway there.
Yeah. I mean, do you ever find yourself just scrolling through your photos in your phone? Like, there's literally no purpose to it. I'm just looking through all my photos.
I need to, because I need to delete a bunch of duplicate, stupid selfies that are just like, oh, this didn't fit the cut. You know, I find myself just mindlessly scrolling social media. That's my problem. Is like it could be Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, anything that's like that quick media, like the 1 minute clips.
Yep.
I love the clips.
I'm telling you, TikTok will get you.
It got me. It got me. I knew it though. That's the bizarre part about it. It's like I knew what was gonna happen, but I was too intrigued by it.
They're gonna delete this podcast when they hear me talking about TikTok. Don't get TikTok.
Well, we don't know how much longer TikTok will be
true.
around.
That's true.
A couple of the social media outlets don't really like me because I used to have a different username and I completely rebranded myself.
Oh no.
I used to run a college party blog called Now That's College, and I changed everything from Now That's College to Modern Day Overthinker when I got sober.
It's kind of like the after phase of the party phase, right? Like, I think that's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah, I did a lot of... I messed up my brain a lot. It was already not in the greatest place anyway, but I did some damage, and I was like, I can't post it. And I was also out of college for a long period of time when I was still running this blog. I was like, I'm just like this weird old guy that never left the party. And I had to stop.
Once you hit 30, you just kind of got to start like drifting away.
It was before 30 even. I felt like it didn't make sense, and I wasn't partying, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't doing anything. I was just like, this doesn't make sense to me, and this is just mindless media. And there was a point where it got pretty big, and had at one point on Twitter we had like 30,000. It was me and a friend of mine. We had like 30,000 followers on Twitter. I used to the Instagram account that I use now that I changed to Modern Day Overthinker used to have 19,000 followers. I lost 9,000 followers when I switched.
I just about hit 3, so I'm getting up there.
You getting up there?
Yeah.
Do you post videos then?
I do not post videos.
Okay.
See, I'm one of those people that has Instagram, but like I'll delete the app and I have to go online to get to it. Like that's how lame I am.
Yeah. Instagram on the website's not very. It's gotten better.
It's so lame.
It's
right?
terrible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, it's not ideal. So you don't even want to look at it.
That's
then.
the point.
That's a good strategy. You got to like compete with yourself. That's pretty funny. So the foreword of the book, you wrote that. Was that a volunteer or was that a voluntold type of situation?
It was kind of both.
He
asked me to write kind of my experience with him and his mental illness. So I just wrote kind of freehand whatever came to mind, what I thought when I thought about his mental illness. And I think what he wanted me to write was kind of about his struggle. But when I was thinking about his mental illness, what came to my mind wasn't his struggle. What came to my mind was just how good of a dad he was. And so that's what I didn't mean for it to be the foreword to the book, and I don't think he meant for it to be the foreword to his book. It was just a letter from me to him, and he was like, yeah, this is going in there. And I was like, well, okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
But no, I felt like what I wanted him to know was that he was lying to himself. His mind was lying to him. And that he was an amazing dad, as much as he kind of blames himself sometimes for passing on his mental illness to his kids, which he did. Thank you for that. But he also passed on the resilience.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Right, yeah. And he chose to do things like make the tools that he came up with in this book. And while there can be generational trauma and mental illness is genetic, at the same time, you can pass on those tools and those skills to your kids. And so he's passed on this desire in me to help other people. And initially, my life was kind of taking the same path that his was taking in the past, where all I could see for my future was suicide. And that was, I really relate to when he says that, and I relate to a lot of his story. I'm kind of the daddy girl of the family. So so I go on the trips with him, and I like to watch him during podcasts and watch his story because I relate to him so much. And so it's really encouraging, even as his daughter, to know what he's been through and to hear of his hospitalizations and some of the thoughts that he has that I can relate to. And then to be able to look back at my childhood and just think, I didn't see any of that. Like, all I saw was this dad who was super playful and super interactive with us. And just to literally think the world of him, like, he's my hero. And I can brag about him because he's too humble to brag about himself.
I know how that goes. I have to have people, like, I still don't, I totally relate to that because, like, people, like, compliment me on things all the time, and I'm just, and I immediately, like, I've gotten better at it, but I used to just, like, immediately, like, have a rebuttal for their compliment.
Right. Well, I have OCD too, so I get that.
Yeah. Just immediately, I just want, I just immediately want to be like, nope.
Yep, you can't take it.
I'll discredit that real quick.
I mean, reading anything, hearing anything, I feel like I have a rebuttal for it, and I think that's just kind of part of that journey.
So when did the OCD start?
Oh,
so it starts differently. It starts
January 6th of 1990. No, I'm just kidding. I was talking with my therapist about it because I had never really considered OCD or thought about OCD.
Yeah, it's misdiagnosed a lot.
Yeah, and I've been to a lot of other therapists and counselors, and no one's ever brought up OCD. And then I was telling her just kind of stories of my past, and she was like, yep, that's OCD. That's OCD. That's OCD. And I was like, really? Like, this is something that other people experience, and there's, like, a name for it, and I, like, can do actual things to get better.
Exposures.
Yeah, and it's completely changed. Like, you know, I'm not turned around, I haven't done a 180 and I'm completely fixed, but it's changed my life to have a name for what's going on in my head and to be able to follow other people who have kind of been through it, like my dad, who was also diagnosed with OCD. But yeah, just to be able to have a name for something and be like, this is real, and this is not who I am, but something that is happening to me that I can control. Yeah.
So you don't. So you were diagnosed more recently after the fact. See, with me, it was like I was like 13, 14. I don't remember the exact. Right around that weird age, anyway, where things are just changing. In general, everything's awkward, and everything around that time period is just weird. And I didn't know what was going on with, like, you know, having these weird thoughts and, like, these fears of, like, the stuff that didn't make sense. And I thought I was, like, going to hurt someone or harm someone. I had a lot of harm OCD stuff, like, where I thought, like, if I didn't do something right perfectly or the way that I had in my head, then something was going to happen to somebody, like, that I cared about. That was, like, that was where it started. Or I thought I was going to do something that was going to get me in trouble at school or whatever. And that started, like, 13, 14. And then when I first went to a psychiatrist, they were like, within, like, 20 minutes, the lady was like, oh yeah, he's bipolar. My parents were like, nope, we're going to somebody else. Because they were like, we know bipolar, because that's been in the family. And they're like, we know he's not bipolar. We don't know what it is. They didn't really know what OCD was, I don't think, at the time. But then luckily I saw somebody after that, and he was like, yeah, this is obsessive compulsive disorder. And then ever since then, I've kind of been in and out of therapy, but more so in therapy the last few years. And then, I don't know if have you been doing like ERP stuff, or?
I've been doing a little bit of exposure therapy.
Yeah.
Just little things here and there, not like some of the major things you think of, like holding a snake, or, you know, I feel like they have these really big scenarios you think of with exposure therapy, but exposure therapy can be like little tiny things throughout your day, like, okay, go talk to 2 people today that you wouldn't normally talk to.
Yeah.
And then slowly increasing that as your comfort level grows. And so I think exposure therapy kind of gets this knock from some people, like they're scared of it just because of how it sounds, like, oh, exposure, I don't want that.
Yeah, it sounds weird, but it's literally like the best.
Yeah.
Statistically, like the best, most proven best method.
And I was talking about it with my counselor, and
it is scary, but it's like one of those things, like, once you do it though, like the results are just like and then consistently do it, obviously.
Right, and you have to stick with it because at first it is
to stick with
terrifying.
It's so much easier to just do the compulsion.
Yeah, definitely. One of the examples she gave me was if you think you're going to hurt somebody, you have these thoughts about hurting people, and you think you're going to hurt somebody, And say you imagine knocking someone over the head with a wine glass, to take that wine glass and stand next to them and see how much control you have. And I was like, that sounds dangerous.
That
I don't know if everyone should do that.
There has been times in the past where like I told my therapist, like, I'm not doing that.
Yep. Yep. I've had to say that a couple times
even
too.
though I knew, like, yeah, you're right, but I'm not ready for that yet. Yeah.
Yep.
So what else do we want to talk about while you're in the hot seat?
Or you can take him back.
Trying to think of. I wasn't prepared for this part, so.
Neither was I.
it threw me off. Well, since you did the forward for the book, you can do the outro for the podcast. How's that?
There you
go. So, if there's one thing about the book or about what your dad's doing that you would want somebody to know about, what would you say? Like, specifically, like, whether it's a resource or something like a quote from the book or something that you've learned that you would want to share with those that are listening right now. Kind of putting you on the spot.
I would really highlight the chapter about keystone habits. And that's something that I think he's been working on. He mentioned the book Atomic Habits that he's reading right now. You can look at your life and be really motivated to change it and think you're going to change it tomorrow. And that can just cause you to pitfall.
Okay.
And so being realistic with yourself and having a lot of grace for yourself. My dad right now, one of the goals that he set for himself is to drink water at every red light that he stops at. And so sometimes, like, we stopped today and there were 4 red lights coming up. He's like, I'm just going to take 4 drinks. And he doesn't always, like, it's nothing specific. He doesn't put any stress around it. It's just every time that he's at a red light, he takes a drink of water. And so his goal for himself is not lose a certain amount of weight, anything huge. It's just, I'm going to drink water when I'm at a red light. And if you can set just the tiniest goal like that and just stick with one and do that consistently and make that a part of your routine, and then once you have that down, add another one, that really is what triggers this huge change in your life over time. But it's slow, just like a lot of the best things in life.
Yeah, a lot of the best things. Because I'm one of those people that wants instant gratification. I want it now.
I'm like, wow, tomorrow I am just going to be beautiful. My whole life's just going to be completely different.
Everything's going to be better. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you jumping on as well, and both of you being here. This is awesome opportunity.